Oh, hi. So yeah, that's just another serial node I created for today's tutorial. But let's be serious. When you're starting out with DaVinci Resolve, those nodes, they can be quite confusing. Especially when you're coming from a layer-based NLE and you don't really know how to handle those. So in today's tutorial, let's find out how to use them, what's the difference between nodes and layers, and how to actually use them to our benefit. Let's get started. So here we are inside DaVinci Resolve. And since we're talking of nodes, what we're really going to be interested in today is this area of our frame. So here we can already see a tiny node tree with 4 serial nodes. And before we explore that any further, we just want to take a quick look at a single node. Alright, so this is a single node. Now, what is a node? In principle, you can think of a node as a tiny bucket that contains your image data. So here we got this bucket and there's our image inside. Now, first thing we notice when looking at our bucket is that we're having 2 inputs and 2 outputs. So the green inputs in our node tree are the actual image data. So that's where our image is fed into, our input, and then processed in the node, so in here somewhere, and then fed out through the other output. The blue input, in contrast, is our key input. So that's where we can input a grayscale image, a black and white image, that tells us which of the areas inside our picture are affected when we do any grading inside our single node. So now you may ask, okay, I have this node thingy and I can feed picture information into it, feed picture information out of it, feed key info in and feed key info out. But actually, how is this different to a layer-based system? Well, one strength of a node-based system is that in fact you don't have those strict rigid layers where one is on top of the other and you can only like swap them in one direction, so decide which is on top of another, but you can actually do some parallel operations. You can go back from the output of this node, for example, or have another node here, do something with that node here, put it in over there, but then also use the same output to feed it in back here. So that's one strength of the node system already. The other thing is that with every single container of image data, you can do your individual keys again inside the node and then broadcast this key information from the key output to several other nodes like that one or wherever you want to go. So in principle, one can say that a layer system is somewhat of a linear system, since every single operation is either on top or below another operation, whereas a node system is somewhat more dynamic, as you can replace those nodes, you can have parallel operations, you can also have layer operations, and additionally those nodes provide additional functionality, which we're gonna see right now when we take another look at different types of nodes that are available in DaVinci Resolve. So now let's take a look at the different types of nodes that are available in DaVinci Resolve. So first of all, let me reset this node tree here. Right click, reset all nodes and grades, resets our node tree to the basic node tree we are used to. So the first thing we see when we take a closer look is that we have a image data input and a image data output. So this is where our image data is fed into a node tree, and that's the original image coming in, and that's the processed image going out for the rendering. So then we're feeding our image data into the first node, and by default the first node always is a serial node. So what is a serial node? It's just a regular corrector that does nothing else but correct the image data according to the changes you're making in the color page. So what's the other nodes that are available? Let's take a look. So right click in here, add node. Okay, we can add another corrector. Drag it into our node connection, and it's already in there. And this is just another serial node. So it does just the same thing than the first serial node. So you can add different corrections in here. And then those corrections are performed after the first node. Hence it's called serial, because it's in a series to the first node. All right. So the next thing we can add is a so-called parallel node. So right click here, add node, parallel mixer. So that's actually a parallel mixer. We can put that in there. And then we can add another corrector and do a connection here, feed the image data in there. And now those two nodes are actually processed in parallel. And I'm about to show you what that means. So using parallel nodes actually only means that you feed the image data from the first node to all of the parallel nodes. So imagine there's more, then those are fed to all those parallel nodes. And then you can make your adjustments in the individual nodes based on the image data that is fed through them from the first node. So all of those receive the same image data. So if we have our containers, they all get the same image one, all that stuff. Now inside there we're doing the processing, and what our parallel mixer does is it gets fed the adjustments. So we feed adjustment 1, adjustment 2, all that stuff. And what it does is it makes sort of one node out of it that has adjustment 1 plus adjustment 2 in it, and then acts as if this node was the only node that got the adjustments, and as if the image data was just fed to that node and then processed and then fed on to the next one. So a parallel mixer just adds up all the adjustments that are done in the individual parallel nodes and then distributes those to the nodes after it. This means actually that we can just go inside one of our nodes, maybe change the hue, and then go to the other node, probably do some sort of selection. Well, yeah, let's try to affect only those. And that's the first thing we can see. So up here, we change the hue. But when we go to the second node, we still have our original image that is fed from over here from the first node. And now we can do some sort of selection here and maybe change the hue the other way, or maybe also even crank up the saturation. So there's some green saturation, that's some yellowish thingy back there. And now if we move on, we can see that in our parallel mixer, we have both those corrections. So in the first node, we have some sort of red yellowish color shift in those areas back there, and the second one we correct some green into it. And now if we turn it off and see what our final image looks like, and we see that in those areas there's some overlay of those red yellowish and green areas, so that's giving us some greenish tint, and then also the other areas from the first one are still affected. Now let's take a look what happens if we turn this one into a so-called layer node. Morph into layer mixer node, and boom. Now what happened there? So in principle, you can think of a layer mixer node just the same as the classic layer stack. So again, we're feeding the same picture information in here everywhere, but then we have our layers, and our O2 is our first layer, O2, and then we get our node number 3, that's the second layer, and so on. And it's processed in a way that every single adjustment that we make in our layer number 2 is done before the adjustment in our node number 3, and that only the top layer actually shows if we leave our composite mode in the layer mixer to normal. So that's another thing we got to talk about. If we go into the layer mixer, we can change our composite mode, for example, to add, color, color burn, color dodge, whatever. You know those composite modes from Photoshop. If you don't, this is not the time to learn them, but I highly encourage you to do so. So what a layer mixer does is it layers those adjustments. So it pretty much does adjustment 2, adjustment 2, then it does adjustment 3. So first that one up here, then that one down here, then the next one down here, and so on. And it stacks those images on top of another, which means that layer mixers are pretty much always then very useful if you want to make very targeted adjustments with masks, for example. So if we take a look over here in the node number 3 and see which area is affected, so we made clear that only the white area here is affected, and we place that white area, we controlled here, so I'm trying to quickly draw around it. Oh yeah, that's also in there. And we place this area on top of what we did in the other node. So in this node, we're affecting all of the image, and then we're placing that one on top. And now we can look at the output and see that this area over here is pretty much what we got from our first node, and the yellow area in here is what we got from our second node, so from that one. That's how layer mixers work. They layer adjustments on top of each other and calculate those based on the composite mode we use inside our layer mixer node. So the next thing I want to talk about is so-called inside and outside nodes. So inside node is pretty much a standard corrector node where we can just pull a key, maybe say this is our key now, so the white areas, and now we can go up here, color, nodes, add outside node, and what it does is it feeds the key from our inside node. So this one feeds the key from the inside node to the outside node, and the outside node does nothing but invert the key. So if we take a look at the keyed images, we can see that the outside node just has the opposite key of our inside node. And this comes in very handy if you, for example, want to isolate some skin and then add some separation to the skin from the background, because in the first node, like in here, you would do the corrections to the skin to refine it, to shift the color to whatever color you want it to, and then in the other node, you just head over to the outside of the skin and make the color separate, do some contrast adjustment to make the skin pop out really good. Or yeah, that's pretty much what you could do. Or with foliage, you could just create some color separation, or you could also compensate for the adjustment you did in the first node, pretty much whatever you want. It just inverts the key from the first node and feeds it to the outside node. So let's see what DaVinci Resolve else got in the bucket. Alright, we've been talking about serial node, parallel nodes, layer nodes, outside nodes, and then there's also splitter combiner nodes. Wow, fancy, right? So actually, this is rather simple. So what splitter combiner node does is it takes the input from the node before and then separates the image into its 3 components. So what this means is that the red channel is fed to the first node, the green channel is fed to the second node, and the blue channel is fed to the third node. So this gives you the ability to work in the individual channels. Now, what is this good for? Well, I don't know. No, actually, a very stylized purpose, for example, is to pan the individual channels, to get this chromatic aberrations look. So if we pan the red channel, for example, we can see this chromatic aberrations appear over on the borders of our subject. And then if we add another vignette on top, for example, we can really recreate an old lens, for example. Also, if we have issues with one of those channels, for example, the highlights in the blue channel or so, we could actually try to cross-feed information from the red to the green or the blue channel in order to partially recover the information from those channels. You just have to make sure that you don't exaggerate on that, because otherwise you will pretty much break your image with it. But when you really only feed the highlight data, that may actually work pretty well. Alright, so that's pretty much all the different kind of nodes you need to know. So I want to just show you some neat little tricks you can use in the node window when you're working with those nodes. So first one is right click, reset all node grades, all nodes and grades, and then we can just take a look in here when we right click there. So what can we do? Actually, let's briefly reset that to where we were before, and if you right click and say clean up node graph, it actually cleans up the node graph for us, so it's better visible what actually goes on with the data in there. Alright, let's reset those. Then what else can we do? Well, first of all, we can add another source. And what this one does is, I'll just remove that source, add source, it adds another input over here. So that one is created. And now what this input does is it feeds another media output we create in the Fusion page. So let's just head over there very quick. And I've already done that and added another media out in here. So when we go back over to the color page, in this case, we've just added the same picture twice. Add another node, corrector, connect it, then look in here and toggle our current node view, and we see that the same image is in there. Now, that's not the very typical use case, but if you, for example, created a very difficult matte in Fusion, or just had another image in Fusion that you wanted to feed into this image right here for compositing, and then you wanted to color correct it or such in a separate way, so not in the same image, you could just do that by adding another source in here and then work with that source over there before feeding that source to the output, or eventually using that source in here as a key for the next node over there. Now what we can also do is add an alpha output channel. And what the alpha output channel allows us is to use a key we're pulling inside our color page to either export with the final media as a separate alpha channel, or to use that alpha channel for compositing inside the DaVinci Resolve. So say if we're having a green screen or somewhat, we would just go inside that node here, pull a key like that, and then only the white areas of our image would get exported later on. So if we just clean that up very strongly to make it clear, and then add the alpha output channel, we will see that once we remove that mask, only the white areas are actually fed to the output of our to the media output of our node tree here. So if we were to go over there to the edit page and then put another clip like below our channel here, we'd see that only the white areas actually do overlay the other clip. Or for example, take that one, and all the black areas have actually gone transparent. And that's how you can really use the power of the powerful qualifiers and the 3D key here, for example, to do green screen work in the DaVinci Resolve inside the color page, which is quite handy, to be honest. Next one, so of course we can zoom in, zoom out, zoom to the window. We can go to original size, which changes the clip scaling or the node tree scaling, we can apply over there on the top. And then as the last one, we can toggle the display mode, which allows us to have the entire viewer as our node tree display, or have our viewer and the node tree side by side. Alright, so now I hope you found this helpful, and if you have any comments, please leave them below. Tell us what you want to see about next, and if you liked our video, as always, please leave us a subscribe and click the like button. Catch you next time.